Each multiplayer map in Halo is actually an in-universe location that's been cataloged and made to work in the UNSC's wargame simulations. In these games, Spartans fight against one another to hone their skills in combat. So in a way, that match of Slayer where you got a negative 15 KD is canon. But more importantly, that play space where you did so terrible is too. So, join me as I obsess over literal garbage and details that probably mean nothing. Let's overanalyze every single detail in every single Season 1 map of Halo Infinite until my brain turns into absolute mush. Aquarius. Aquarius Terraforming Solutions. Industry leader in returning life to barren worlds. As the description states, this facility is owned and operated by Aquarius Terraforming Solutions, a group that specializes in restoring glassed worlds to a more habitable state. A large part of fixing a planet's surface involves reseeding it with beneficial plant life, and that means perfecting the science behind agriculture. There are at least 11 different kinds of crops being grown in this particular facility, most of which are being closely monitored and sprayed by overhead sprinklers. These plants include large-leafed greens, small-leafed greens, white tubular flowers, red and green-leafed plants, red flowers, some kind of vine, another type of vine, small orange flowers, lettuce-like greens, blue and purple lettuce-like plants, and a species of what appears to be bioluminescent blue mushrooms. Butterflies flutter by the vines in the rafters above the play space. There are occasional mechanical arms placed near a few of the crops as well, obviously designed to remove them. Bags of fertilizer are stacked on pallets and periodically left out by various crops throughout the complex. Next to a lot of the fertilizer are stacks of barrels with UNSC labels. Vials and bottles are shelved near microscopes, plants, and other scientific equipment, likely filled with various plant matter or other fertilization solutions. Canisters marked oxygen and hydrogen are placed sporadically across the space, some of which are connected to tubes that seem to feed the gas into other parts of the facility. Hatches in the rooms where the canisters are connected to tubes lead to a maintenance access area filled with valves. Each of these likely helps regulate water and gas pressure throughout the facility. Across from these is a delicious-looking sandwich. A complex network of pipes carry various liquids from point A to B, likely water, perhaps mixed with various chemicals to aid growth. All water appears to be fed through a few primary filtration systems. Clear tubes can be seen funneling the liquid across the station, some of which is green and nasty, obviously not yet purified. Other tubes carry clean blue water that's clearly been purged of any contaminants. Inaccessible until entering Forge mode are a bunch of office spaces with various readouts and monitoring systems, each carefully analyzing the station's flora. One such office space contains a whiteboard with some interesting drawings. The left side is a scoreboard with Spartan code names, kill counts, and tags. Just above that is a drawing of a warthog piloted by a few Marines that are about to splatter a grunt. The right side is a map labeled Training Yard with a few arrows and illustrations that denote points of interest. This is actually a top-down view of the tutorial area that's connected to the map Livefire, but more on that later. Finally, the top middle has writing that says Rangemaster M. Brinkley. Just to the right of that is a console covered in switches that likely power or disable certain mechanisms within the facility. They look important. On one side of the map is an inaccessible large open room with plenty of floor space for walking around and observing select groups of the same plants seen in other portions of the greenhouse. Perhaps this area contains plants that are being fed new experimental growth formulas and must therefore be monitored from all angles. Inside this room are a few strange plant samples contained in jars. These odd flora aren't being grown anywhere in the facility. A few security cameras watch over the space, each placed in open areas for best coverage. I'm really not sure why they need them though. Maybe to monitor their employees so that they don't steal any of the company's work and sell it to competitors. Unsurprisingly, the logo for Aquarius Terraforming Solutions is plastered on the walls of a few sections of the map. Windows on the ceiling reveal heavy rainfall, gray skies, and an active thunderstorm, adding an almost ominous vibe to the location. Bazaar, dusty streets and double doors. The East African Protectorate intended to hastily rebuild areas destroyed during the Covenant's initial invasion of Earth, but unfortunately, this mission was far more costly than they had initially anticipated. The project was titled Rebirth and was invested in by the UNSC and the United Earth governments. It also served as the perfect front for the UNSC to extend their research into the Forerunner artifacts at Voy. A rift has formed between the original citizens and those that have moved to the area to aid in construction and scientific research. I'm not entirely certain what that means, but if I had to take a guess, I'd say the original people probably feel invaded and that the influx of new residents are unwelcome. Various vehicle sounds can be heard in the background from police sirens, helicopters, ambulances, and the beeping of trucks reversing. The skyline is dominated by tall and imposing buildings, some of which have cranes atop them, serving as further evidence of Project Rebirth. Several other cranes hang over the play space as well. The Mombasa space elevator can also be seen with construction scaffolding attached to it, but it still remains mostly destroyed. The layout of this area is obviously very similar to the streets of Mombasa that the Rookie visited in ODST and that the Chief visited in Halo 2. That's because this map is roughly in the same area, made clear by the fact that you can see the Mombasa space elevator. The destruction caused by the Covenant during their initial invasion in 2552 hasn't been entirely wiped away just yet, as a destroyed building can be seen in the corner of the map. Pieces of paper and stickers that serve as advertisements for things like food and travel adorn the dilapidated walls of the various buildings. There are some extremely worn posters that say, John 117, Petty Officer of the Navy, and Be a Hero. John 117. These aren't the only propaganda posters, there are two more. One is of a Spartan 4 in a set of recruit armor carrying a railgun. Below the soldier it says, join the fight. The other illustration is of long swords flying upwards, accompanied by the text, from Earth to the stars. If you look closely at some of these worn posters, a secret message will reveal itself. It says, ow, my face hurts. There's also a graffitied mural of the Chief on the side of one of the buildings. Crates of fruit and vegetables litter the area, filled with carrots, bananas, mangoes, tomatoes, apples, and watermelons. Among the produce are feral chickens that roam around the same space. This all makes perfect sense considering what the name of this map is. In case you're unaware, a bazaar is actually a collection of street vendors and shops akin to a farmer's market. The stores you can find in the West Market by Halleck Street are a couple of Maduno's, Ration and Spice, a cafe, the Corner Market, SA Salvage, Podge's Garage, Den's Authentic Food, The Fish Guy, Nairobi Snacks and Drinks, Tanaga, Family Medicine and Mercies, Moto Cuckoo, Garma Abe's-san, and Biashara Foods. There are a few other shops off of Halleck and Cuckoo Street that are tucked away from the central storefront as well. They are Cuckoo Fruits Snack, The Roost Star, Tijuana, and Biaga. A large truck carrying a very big tank of non-potable water is parked in a loading zone just to the side of the main market. Either the people working on Project Rebirth are doing a terrible job, or the locals simply don't care about the cleanliness of their homes because there's trash everywhere. It's possible that this was all left here during the destruction caused by the Covenant, but come on, just throw your trash in the right place, it's not that hard. Bits and pieces of building debris, empty boxes, discarded banana peels, bags of trash, soda cans, drink cups, potato chip bags, tattered cloth, pieces of paper, ironically, empty bottles of Super Clean and other garbage litter the streets. Among the trash is a newspaper article that uses an image of a Spartan, a shot taken directly from Halo 4. The title and contents are unfortunately not legible. Inside one of the buildings on the upper level of the map is a restaurant or bar. By the counter are a few sticky notes attached to the wall next to some chalk-drawn text. They read, "The code is ADDQD, best Maharagwe in Africa, and we're running out of stickers, use the rest of them wisely." The chalk-drawn text says, "Today sunny," and "This is Sleva and she likes tips." Pictures of the surrounding area can be seen hung up on the walls in a few areas, as well as some illegible graffiti. Bags of what appears to be concrete powder labeled Synoviet are placed in various locations on the map. This company is responsible for a lot of human vehicle and ship manufacturing, providing the UNSC with many of its instruments of war. And apparently concrete. There are also cardboard boxes strewn about with the names Rounder International and Vertex on the sides. There's no information about either of these organizations, and as far as I know, this is the first mention of them in canon. Am I really sitting here talking about cardboard boxes right now? Behemoth. Buried for millennia, this ancient structure rises from beneath the sands. Despite the incredible age of the facility, power still flows through it, and various mechanisms continue to operate. For example, these great big trenches and the towers placed throughout them course with an unknown and ancient energy source. Like many other locations in Halo Infinite, Behemoth takes place on Zeta Halo, as evident by the sprawling surface of the ring on the horizon, and, the fact that it's directly stated in issue 123 of Canon Fodder. This facility appears to be part of the same spine-like structure that connects to the Silent Auditorium in Halo Infinite's campaign. Arcs of blue energy flow across the strange system. Like I said before, this indicates that these machines are still very much so active. Bizarrely, the ring fracture doesn't appear to be visible at all, at least not from this location. Either the broken bit is somehow too far away to see, or this map takes place before the explosion. Much like a few odd locations on the Ark, this map is placed somewhere within a seemingly infinite desert. Sand and large rocks stretch out into the distance as far as the eye can see. That's where the similarities end, however. The aforementioned locations on the Ark were very much prison-like, and the structures within seemed much older than typical Forerunner machinery. Not to imply that this area is new, because it isn't. It was built over 100,000 years ago, along with the rest of the ring, but it's still an interesting difference nonetheless. Evidence of modern vehicle traffic can be found in the form of tire tread marks in the sand surrounding the buildings. These impressions were likely left here when the UNSC cataloged this location for wargame simulations. The installation is atop a collection of hexagonal pillars, the same building blocks that make up the rest of the ring. Strangely though, these are all elevated, lifting the entire building and surrounding area into the air and creating a cliff face. It appears that these pillars elevating was a somewhat recent event given the fact that the lower blocks have very little sand buildup. Why it lifted out of the ground in the first place, I can't say. In the center of the map is a deep shaft that stretches far into the ring's substructure. Blue lightning flashes from one side to the other nearly constantly, almost giving it the appearance of a shield door. On all four sides of the bridge that hangs over the previously mentioned pit are hallways, two of which are inaccessible normally and can only be reached by removing a few doors. Following them to their conclusion leads to a dead end with another shaft above. Deleting the door that doubles as a roof reveals an opening to the upper areas of the map. The large ring structure that wraps around the construct serves an unknown purpose. The pieces don't move and no energy seems to flow through them aside from whatever powers these little blue lights. Each side of the map is outfitted with 3 gravity lifts, one of which is used to lift things from the bottom level to the top. The other 2 will fling you into the far right middle or far left middle quadrant of the playspace. I'm assuming these were used to help transport objects from point A to B during the area's initial construction. Right in front of the chutes that send you from the bottom floor to the top are shafts that have the opposite effect, taking you from the top to the bottom, likely helping to facilitate the same role as the gravity lifts. I've mentioned this in the past and I'll say it again. The Forerunners always made their creations beautiful with ornate engravings and aesthetic flair, even in locations that they may never visit again. This structure is one such example of that. Just look at the platform in the center of the map. It's an artistically crafted combination of hard light and metal that appears to serve no purpose beyond vanity. Unless, here's a weird thought, what if this entire building is a weapon deployed because of the destruction of the ring? Think of the shaft that stretches deep below as the barrel. The lightning could create a hard light projectile, and the platform above would act as an amplification lens. I'm imagining the outer ring spinning intensely as it charges up and prepares to blast something out of the sky, like a souped-up version of the relay towers seen in various places all over the course of Halo's story. We've heard mention of rings having defensive measures, but as far as I know, aside from sentinels, it's never actually been depicted. Maybe this is one such weapon. Deadlock. UNSC forces have yet to breach this banished encampment. Central to the map is a massive piece of banished artillery, a Gorspike cannon or Kawasaki Workshop shipbreaker. Each piece of the turret has its own unique glyph, likely painted on during the manufacturing process to help denote its function. This beast of a gun is primed and ready to eliminate the Mulsanne-class UNSC frigate, the Panama, suspended in the air above. This particular frigate was driven away from its battle group by a contingent of banished warships in an attempt to bring it within firing range of this massive weapon. The cloud cover, unfortunately, obscures the sky, so it's impossible to say with certainty whether or not this takes place on a Halo. Spartans were sent onto the ground to disable the stationary gun and give the ship a chance to escape, or at the very least evacuate the individuals inside. It's unclear whether or not they accomplished this goal, but based on a few clues I'll mention, it would seem that they were at least partially successful. Each side of the map contains a decent-sized building with a landing pad and a staging area underneath. In front of each base is a single-seat shade turret for smaller defense. Interestingly, both of these bases have holographic flags depicting a top-down view of a bird over 2 crossed swords, or a snake. These symbols have been used in wargame simulations for some time, typically adorning the blue and red flags. Their presence here seems to contradict the description of the map. If UNSC forces haven't been able to breach this encampment, then how are there clearly human flags here? It's quite possible that the Banished simply stole these as war trophies. On the other hand, the map's description could simply be slightly misleading, and the Spartan team that was supposed to infiltrate the base mentioned in Cannon Fodder issue 122 successfully did. There seems to be evidence to support this. For one, why wouldn't the primary AA gun destroy the Panama unless it had been disabled? For 2, how would the UNSC catalog this location if they weren't able to get some kind of sensor equipment in the area to scan it? The solution? The Spartan team dispatched to the zone managed to disable the turret and gather recon regarding the base before they were either driven out or killed. Thus, the encampment has not yet been totally breached. Of course, this could mean a Spartan left the previously mentioned flags there, but I can't imagine why they'd do that. Perhaps as an act of defiance? I'm not sure, but I find the war trophy explanation a bit more compelling and a lot more banished. Or maybe I am really just overthinking it and the flags are only here for war games purposes akin to the various equipment and weapons strewn about each space. On one side of the map is a crashed Pelican. Either it was the vehicle the Spartans used to infiltrate the base, or it was shot down in one of the aerial fights far above. An eerie red light emanates from beyond the mountains, clear evidence of a larger banished presence. This is also where some of the banshees I mentioned earlier seem to originate from. Large flocks of likely panic-stricken birds flap about above the play space. These odd avian anomalies were likely brought here by the Forerunners as a form of conservation thousands of years ago. Wasps and banished banshees shooting blue plasma for some reason can be seen engaging in dogfights not far from the front of the human ship. A smaller stationary gun overlooks a mucky lake, cautiously scanning the skies and eagerly waiting to take its shot at the Panama. To the right of the smaller anti-air gun are a few leafless, seemingly burnt trees that are separated, likely bent to the side by banished machinery when this encampment was originally established. Distant gunfire and the sounds of animals echo both within and far beyond the confines of the canyon. A large red light is casting a symbol onto a tall, craggy cliff face opposite of one of the bases, likely serving as an ominous warning for those who are foolish enough to approach. Fragmentation. These beacons are no stranger to explosive conflict. The description of this map seems to imply there were battles here long before the arrival of the UNSC Infinity. This makes sense given this ring's long and storied history during the Flood-Human Forerunner War. This piece of Zeta Halo is the location that the 511th Infantry Division first made landfall after evacuating during the initial banished attack on the Infinity. This contingent has begun surveying the area as best as they can while simultaneously fending off aggressor sentinels. Clearly, they've been successful at defeating some, as evident by this disabled one. Tire tread marks left behind by the Marines in the area are scattered all over the place. Random collections of human supplies are stacked in a few pockets of the arena. One particular group contains a hull repair kit that can repair most spaceships. 2 doors block small rooms on each side of the map. In order to open them, a small terminal directly next to them must first be activated. The purpose of these rooms is unclear, but as per usual, they contain tons of needlessly pretty and ornate patterns and structures. What sounds like mountain goats can be heard screaming somewhere in the hills above. The name of the map is actually a double meaning. Not only does it refer to the fact that the UNSC forces are fragmented, but it also refers to the ring itself. Large cloud and bird-filled expanses prevent any on-foot traversal to the other islands. Far beyond the vast gap are 2 waterfalls and 2 active beam emitters. The area overlooking the large gap contains some UNSC equipment, namely a satellite dish and some other sensors. Placed atop a small crate is a laptop displaying some code that constantly references some kind of tracer. I'm not really sure what any of it means. The 2 emitters within the play space are inactive for whatever reason, or at the very least, not firing. Each of these has a gravity lift on the front and a small room underneath that contains an eld, the Forerunner symbol for the Mantle of Responsibility. The same holographic flags seen on Deadlock adorn the walls of the structures as well. Adjacent to both towers are very odd 3-pronged mechanisms that emit and disperse some kind of strange blue energy inwards. I have no idea what their purpose could be. Maybe they're part of the ring's teleportation grid? I really have no clue. In the center path is a broken stone ring, the very same kind found throughout Halo Infinite's campaign. Another can be found overlooking the map from the edge of one of the cliffs. Whether or not these contain any data like the ones in the campaign is unclear. Highpower. Highpower with a high tower. Much like Deadlock, Highpower also contains a Mulsanne-class frigate in its skies. In fact, this ship is also the UNSC Panama and is actively engaged with a Covenant remnant cruiser dubbed Purveyor of Virtue. The 2 behemoths are actively fighting over the facility below as it serves as an integral power and fuel processing station. The Covenant forces want to use this station for their own gain, but the Panama is doing everything it can to prevent its capture. The human ship is outfitted with a Bright Lance reflex laser that can take down shields, but isn't quite capable of completely defeating the enemy craft. So instead, their goal is to simply delay the ship's advances while supplies are being transported out of the facility. The Purveyor could easily eviscerate the Panama if it made use of its full weapon suite, but doing so would also destroy this valuable power station, thus leaving the two ships in a stalemate. I'm not entirely certain where this map takes place, but it's clearly not on Zeta Halo, as there's no ring on the horizon. I also sincerely doubt the Banished would let a Covenant remnant ship anywhere near one of their strongholds. Given the precarious situations this ship seems to find itself in, it's difficult to say which battle takes place first, as both of them could easily end in its destruction. However, considering the Purveyor's inability to destroy them on Highpower, I think we can surmise that the Panama survives this engagement by either retreating and allowing them to seize the station, or by defeating them outright. For some strange reason, the same chickens seen on the streets of Bazaar also roam around this installation. A large wall in the middle labeled Mid-Gate Processing bisects the play space. The ground by the gate has some yellow lines painted on, perhaps denoting a loading zone. Next to both of these indicator lines are closed yellow doors. Keypads adjacent to the doors simply read Access Closed. The left side of the devices appear to be a keycard slot for entry. Not far from the doors is a warning label containing a bunch of seemingly random words and phrases. These can also be found elsewhere, such as on these large shipment containers. A crate packed full of dirt on the side of a cliff is evidence of excavation, and sure enough, just below it is a strange tubular cave with various man-made walls and tubes. Not far from one of the bases is a fairly deep hole filled with big stones and several pipes leading down into it. A high-powered conveyor belt, the UNSC equivalent of a gravity lift, is placed at the mouth of the hole, obviously used to fling things across the gap. Perhaps this was used as a garbage pit of sorts, a place to discard rock when digging out tunnels and mounting structures in the map's many walls. Or maybe this was once an opening to a deeper substructure and it collapsed in on itself, potentially trapping workers deep inside. Launch Site. Saber Proving Grounds test the limits of human velocity. This location is obviously, as the name implies, a launch site for Sabers. These small fighter jets were most notably used during Operation Uppercut by Noble Team in an attempt to stop the fall of Reach. Thanks to their versatility, these initially top-secret aerial vehicles were stealthily put into production and dispatched at key UNSC-controlled locations after the Human Covenant War. These fast and deadly ships can easily outmatch Seraphs and Grievers, making them priority targets for the Banished or any lingering created forces. This particular launch pad is labeled Saber Launch Pad 3 and has one vehicle docked. Its engines appear to be on and in a standby state, likely primed and ready for takeoff. Fixed to the sides of the craft are 4 tanks that appear to be holding some kind of volatile and, judging by the frost buildup, cold substance. Perhaps some kind of coolant. A small metallic crane moves back and forth above it. The mechanism seems to be in a preset movement pattern, despite the fact that it's not actually manipulating any objects. Beside it are 4 large spherical tanks, perhaps containing the same icy contents within the tubes attached to the Saber. On the wall, just next to the fighter craft, is a logo for the squadron that says 22nd First Response. Above that is text which reads, UNSC Planetary Defense 22nd First Response Wing Launch Site 2A. Not too far away from the Saber is a tunnel that leads upwards. It seems to be some kind of elevator, likely used to ferry supplies to and from the facility. Set into one of the complex walls is a large closed gate, labeled Saber Hangar. Just beyond that, a high-speed conveyor belt. Using it propels you over a brown and murky pond. The map is nicely tucked into a large mountain range, likely to obscure a line of sight and keep prying eyes away from this enigmatic Saber launch site. The eerie sounds of crows, owls, and the distant cries of wolves can be heard from somewhere beyond the walls of the facility, deep within the woods. Every so often, additional Sabers can be seen blasting off from behind distant mountaintops, likely originating from launch sites precisely like the one the map takes place in. Far above is a small or perhaps distant natural satellite. Adjacent to it is yet another, but this one is fractured with bits of rubble and dust floating within its orbit. What caused its destruction is unknown, but surely it must have impacted with something enormous, like a colliding meteor or some other strange celestial mass. Live fire. Instructors at the Avery J. Johnson Academy of Military Science ensure their Spartans are prepared for any challenge. This map takes place on a highly classified world that's been extremely well hidden so as to keep the created unaware of its presence. Hardcore information sanitation and compartmentalization techniques were employed to keep this valuable location out of their digital hands. Its current purpose is to be a safe haven for Spartans and any other UNSC forces that survived the aftermath of the created takeover. Many aspects of the Cole Protocol, a methodology and eventual order first conceived by Admiral Preston J. Cole during the Human Covenant War, are used to keep the location completely under wraps. This strategy was successfully employed to prevent the Covenant from discovering Earth until 2552. This rule made it so all UNSC ships evacuating from engagements were forbidden from plotting direct slipspace courses to any known human population. If for any reason the captain of a ship became aware of its intended capture or imminent destruction, all data, especially navigational, was to be wiped from their ship's systems before initiating self-destruction. A large computer screen on the right side of the playspace cycles through a list of recent Spartan training graduates, but instead of using names, it lists service numbers. Much like Launch Site, Live Fire is nicely nestled within a seemingly remote area, using the nearby mountain range to help conceal its location. Beyond the confines of the map, in the opposite direction of where the tutorial area is located, are several inaccessible buildings, only one of which is labeled. It says Building 9. Not only is this military academy named after Sergeant Johnson, but the school's symbol is a Mark 5B helmet. Given June's leadership role in Spartan 4 training, perhaps it serves as a nod to Noble Six's sacrifice during the events of Halo Reach. One side of the map is outlined by an artificial river that eventually leads far off and into a hillside in the distance. I'm really not sure what its purpose would be aside from maybe diverting the flow of water. A pelican occasionally flies by above the water feature. Across from the river is a small courtyard filled with brute target dummies. You can actually shoot off certain bits of their armor. Small digital scrolling signs warn of live fire training in progress. One spot in the map contains a small pond being fed by several man-made flood control gates. Not far from that pond are several security cameras, much like an Aquarius, that watch over the area. In the back of the map is a storage room filled with mostly unremarkable items, aside from one of the most legendary pieces of UNSC hardware, the forklift. Adjacent to the storage room are two large doors, one labeled Administration and the other labeled Shooting Range. As the signage suggests, these doors lead to the tutorial and weapon drill areas. These passageways lead to an entire section of the map that is only accessible by starting the tutorial. Doing so will first greet you with a few cutscenes, one depicting an earlier moment of Agrina's life, the Spartan fireteam leader within the academy, and a conversation between her and an unnamed Spartan 4, who you take control of. The starting area is a large and spacious landing pad covered in various equipment, such as crates of different sizes, trucks, forklifts, tanks, and a parked pelican, the same one used to deliver you, Agrina, and a boatload of other Spartan 4s to the facility. It appears the tutorial takes place immediately after Zeta Halo and the Infinity are transported to an unknown location in the beginning of Halo Infinite's campaign.
We just got word that the Infinity is missing. The ring gone.
Continuing into the next area will take you inside a building. Within is a semicircle of UNSC flags and a window that allows you to see a courtyard. This outer space is filled with mongooses, marines chatting, and technicians working on a warthog. Just to the right of that are a few more warthogs within a small repair bay. Looking out another large window reveals a few more marines on a catwalk outside. In the next area is a single marine sitting at a desk, typing away at the computer terminal in front of him. Continuing onward will bring you to a large room filled with computer banks and a few more marine workers. Central to the room is a holotable containing your personal AI. These simplistic allies appear to be dumb AIs more akin to Auntie Dot from Halo Reach rather than the likes of Cortana or Serena. The next room before exiting onto a movement course contains a flight of stairs, lockers, a UNSC poster depicting a saber, and a bunch of random supplies. The right side of the room contains the very same whiteboard illustration seen in the office space of Aquarius. Its presence here indicates that the drawn map is actually of the training course contained in the Avery J. Johnson Academy of Military Science. Once you enter the movement course, the very same recent graduate screen from the actual multiplayer play space is on the left side of the area. There are a few Marines on the ground level preparing themselves with basic stretches prior to their attempt to complete the movement course. Just behind them is a barred off room filled with more supplies. Moving on to the next section will bring you into a cave with a cell. This cage is filled with grunt decoys, another of which is blocking the main path and must be meleeed to proceed. The open courtyard beyond that is filled with platforms of varying heights, ropes to climb, supplies, tons of spent bullet casings, a few more grunt dummies, and a brute decoy. The final room before entering the firing range is an armory, packed to the brim with more random supplies and, more importantly, weapons. The second to last part of the tutorial sets you up with live rounds in the firing range. Basic simulated AI Spartans move throughout the firing zone, likely making use of the same technology behind the hologram armor ability. Directly in front of you is a box containing whatever weapon you choose to practice with. In this particular case, during the tutorial, it's a commando. To the left is a grenade pad, and to the right, a small terminal which allows you to reset the targets in the firing range. Finally, you enter the last part of the tutorial, the actual map. live fire. A few other Spartan 4s linger around the map while you are able to familiarize yourself with the arena. Once you've explored every point of interest, a live fire exercise with your fellow Spartans begins, most of which behave like they've never held a weapon in their lives. The tutorial ends with Agrina and the playable Spartan 4 approaching a pelican from the same landing zone they entered the facility in. Agrina departs after delivering a pep talk and further cementing the fact that Chief is MIA. If you head back into the main parts of the map within the caves of Building 7, things start to get really interesting. A small door labeled Building 9, previously yellow but the paint has been blown off by a grenade, depicts an Oni insignia. This indicates that the live fire complex was actually an Oni facility prior to it being used to train Spartans. With the help of Spartan Din, we can reveal what lies beyond this strange door. At first glance, it's fairly unassuming, an elevator shaft that stretches deeply into the facility. At the bottom is a dark and large unused section of rooms. According to him, this area was constructed during the very beginning of the Human Covenant War and was hidden here so that Oni could secretly conduct their research. This was where Din received his first set of Mjolnir, seemingly implying that it was these very pieces. This particular suit is a set of Mirage armor, which is a modified version of SPI, the type of armor that most Spartan 3s wear. After explaining this to the playable unnamed Spartan 4, Eratus, a banished AI and the first of his kind, suddenly takes control of the old armor, thus creating the newest version of the Infection game mode. Recharge. Power still courses through the walls of this neglected Axis facility. As the description and their logo being placed on the walls in the building suggests, this station is operated and owned by Axis, a corporation known for their infrastructure and manufacturing capabilities. This organization remained relatively small until partnering with the UNSC during a human insurrection. Axis now acts as the leaders of several independent worlds, leveraging their vast resources to manipulate and control local governments. Dr. Halsey devised a plan to weaken their grip on these worlds by having UNSC operatives infiltrate some of their facilities. Once they made it inside, they'd send supplies to non-designated locations and plant false information to incite conflict and create confusion. Though this place may be neglected, it's still very active. A large turbine in the middle of the map occasionally powers on, whirring loudly. The floor above this mechanism is called the recharge deck. Power courses through these odd underwater computer banks, and a few other mechanisms remain online as well, such as lights, pistons, and satellites. The piston that I mentioned is labeled a hydro piston, indicating it uses water somehow to function. There are 4 switches in one corner of the map labeled emergency access only. There's also a small screen that says 21.21.10/security access point. Above those, a few displays say keycard needed. It's hard to say exactly what purpose these switches serve. O2 and hydrogen tanks litter the ground in some areas. I have no idea what they'd be used for in a facility such as this. There are a bunch of inaccessible rooms that are packed full of various items. 3 waterfalls trickle into this large pool, clearly originating from the huge man-made cascade that's visible outside. A large 2 is printed on the wall and visible through the window, perhaps indicating this is the second dam connected to the installation. This facility contains more security cameras and new warnings that security badges must be displayed, otherwise you may face prosecution. A large screen close by seems to display the BIOS of a computer running some kind of UNSC operating system called UNSC Workbench version 10.2. These displays are actually found all across lots of maps, some of which I've already discussed earlier. Below the Workbench version number is some information, a terminal designation, a cell number, and perhaps a date. Some binary code that I wasn't able to translate, and the phrase Guru Meditation version 1.0. The term Guru Meditation was originally an error message on old Amiga computers that would display after crashes, perhaps indicating that the UNSC is using very, very, very dated software. Maybe this is intentional though. It's possible that the UNSC started adopting old school software to help stop the created from infiltrating their systems. Not far from the window where you can see the outside waterfall is a large door that seems to lead further into the facility. A yellow door labeled A12 is inaccessible even in Forge. Next to it is a keypad that says access closed, as well as a display stating emergency access only. There's absolutely no way this place is safe or up to code. Many aspects are disheveled and in serious disrepair. Logos are peeling off, there are piles of trash on the floor, most of these floodgates are closed, and a large overhead fan continuously grinds against the wall. A few of the windows on the ceiling are busted out, allowing rain to fall in. Puddles in a power plant. Very safe, definitely not a lawsuit waiting to happen. The 4 piston-like mechanisms attached to the central turbine are all initially malfunctioning, stating that maintenance is required. After a reboot, they appear to be fully operational, but still display a system error. Just below the broken fan that I mentioned earlier is a really strange Tesla-like device containing some kind of electrical vortex that spins and arcs infinitely. This entire area is clearly a hydroelectric dam, so maybe this is where some of the energy is stored? Regardless of its purpose, it's certainly very ominous looking. Signage in the area indicates it's called the Whirlpool Dam. Streets. The tranquility of this Mombasa back alley is pierced by the sound of heavy gunfire. These crowded pathways are home to a number of individuals participating in illicit activities. It's relatively close to the Void portal site from Halo 3, making it an ideal location to uncover Forerunner secrets. Naturally, the allure of this new technology attracts insurrectionist factions, Covenant splinter groups, and banished human forces. The Spartans who were tasked with protecting the portal at Void occasionally conduct training exercises in areas that are more actively used by the aforementioned terrorist groups. Additional evidence of UNSC activity also appears in the form of a few random items, such as duffel bags or rations. One section of the alleyway is the entrance to a couple of train or subway access points, namely Hope and Makupa Station, both of which are currently closed. Everything you'd expect out of a train station is here. Ticket booths, storage lockers, a train schedule, and ATMs that don't appear to work properly. There are a few new company names and organizations here that I've never seen before. They are New Mombasa Transit Authority, New Mombasa Waste Management, who are doing a terrible job by the way, Mombasa Port Authority, and the New Mombasa Energy Company. The walls of the map are plastered with posters and advertisements for things like food, tourism, books, propaganda, auto repair, a picture of a random car, and for sure, not sketchy watch repair. You can also find photos of Tayari Plaza, the same location that Buck attempted to free Veronica from a broken drop pod during the events of ODST. In one alleyway is a picture of a cute little kitty cat on the side of a vending machine. The opposite side has a sticker of an Argus helmet, the same armor Linda wears, as well as an image of a few strange-looking vehicles that look like gremlins. Much like Bazaar, Streets also takes place in New Mombasa, so a lot of the same garbage found there litters the ground here as well. There's also a bed amongst the filth. You'd have to be pretty desperate to sleep here. Speaking of garbage, opposite from the train station is a precinct for the infamously corrupt New Mombasa Police Department. Just to the right of the entrance is an NMPD information center and waiting room that's covered in posters for the organization. Behind the counter is a framed picture of the markets in Bazaar, and just behind that, a mural of Master Chief with text that says, "A hero never dies." You can also see the New Mombasa space elevator as it dominates a portion of the skybox. It looks to be in far better shape than it is in Bazaar. On top of that, some of the same sounds of the city echo in the distance. The streets are filled with shops and businesses, some of which are actually open. Across from one of the many shops is a small, crude table set up with food and chairs. The stores you can find are Eastern Craft, Birdcage, the so cleverly named Pizza, The Corner, a cafeteria, Burger 24, Kenya Vibe, a hostel, Lotus, Jimmy's Books and Stationers, Morningstar Apartments, Top 5 Mombasa Hair Fashion, The Dugout Bar, a laundromat, 24th Street Walk, Ration and Spice, a noodle joint, a sushi place, Mercy's, Maduno, an ice cream shop, a mechanic, a hotel, and Arcade Game Zone. Arcade Game Zone houses the Kenya Vibe Bar, a mini market with assorted magazines and coffee, a vending machine, digital air hockey, and most importantly, 7 arcade machines. 3 of the machines are running a game called Slip Space Invaders, a reskin of the classic Space Invaders. In this game, you control a saber and shoot at banshees, seraphs, and phantoms. The outside of the cabinets are adorned with saber decals and a picture of the chief. The other 3 cabinets are running this really weird looking game called Halo Infinite, and the outsides are decorated with decals of a scorpion tank, Linda's helmet, and the chief. Crudely drawn on the backs of these is the phrase, "This is madness." Advertisements for Hollow Puppy, a friend you can count on, coffee, Goss soda, and other random things serve as some of the primary sources of light for the area.
Drink like a Spartan. Be a Spartan. Goss soda.
A sign for AMG Transport Dynamics is tucked away in one of the map's many rooms. This company was responsible for the original Warthog prototype. Synoviet's logo is affixed to a few locations as well. For some reason, there are a few different variants of pigeon stickers stuck to the walls. There are a few additional inaccessible alleyways as well that can only be entered by starting the map in Forge and deleting the gates and debris. There's nothing particularly interesting about either one, aside from these goofy little carts. Several sticky notes stuck in various locations, such as on the planters containing palm trees, read, right side, first met, 27.3.6.vj. Clearly some kind of code for a no doubt illegal and perhaps even banished related meetup. If you enjoyed this analysis, I have others just like it where I dive deep into the details of Halo 3's multiplayer maps. Go check them out, and while you're at it, subscribe. I've got plenty more where this came from and have already started on a video for Halo Infinite's Season 2 maps. Thanks so much for sticking around until the end. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go play some Halo.